how adherent were the participants? And because did you help them with this, or because adherence is also a big factor, right? When these studies are hard to measure.
Yeah. So very importantly for Diet Fits, we didn't set a percent that they had to hit or a gram amount they had to hit. I know from doing these studies that if you want to get a grant reviewer to fund this, you should give them a percent. We're going to be very scientific and we're going to hit this number of grams or this percent. If you follow a real human being from day to day, if you follow a nutrition professional day to day, they can't hit those numbers day after. It's too much counting. People, if you're going to enjoy your food, you try your best. So what we did instead was we said, okay, so there's going to be a limbo phase where you try to go as low as you can. So cut out every carb you can, cut out every gram of fat you can, just so you know you're making a huge difference in your diet. We want you to get to 20 grams of fat or 20 grams of carb in the first 8 weeks. But then we want to look you in the eye and say, are you happy? Can you do this socially? Can you find meals like this? Or is this a diet that you would go on now and go off when the study is over? Because if that's what it is, then you're not there yet. Please add a little carb or a little fat back. Are you there yet? No? Okay, please add a little more carb or a little more fat back. Now look us in the eye. Could you do this forever? Okay, if you think you could do it forever, then that's actually what America wants to know what that is. Like, what's a reasonable low carb and a reasonable low fat? And so if you look at the paper, I won't be able to come up with those numbers off the top of my head, but the low fatters couldn't really get below 25% fat, even though an Ornish type diet or a Pritikin or a Neil Bernard Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine might be 10% fat or 15% fat. These are average people. They got maybe down to 25% fat. And the carb people didn't come near 5 or 10% carb. They did for a bit. They got there in the 8 weeks. And then they were back up at 25, 30% carb by the time the year was done. But they lost lots of weight and they had lots of metabolic improvement. Both groups were counseled to focus on avoiding added sugar and refined grain. And that cleared up a lot of issues. And actually, a fabulous postdoctoral research fellow who's now an assistant professor at Stanford, did a new paper that was just published where American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, where it was, we were looking at how low in carb or fat you got and how high you got in quality. So if you can imagine sort of a 2x2 table in each group, who got the highest and lowest in the fat or the carb, but who got the highest or lowest in quality in both groups. The winners got low in carb or fat and high in quality. And it made a difference that they were listening to the quality part of the diet when it came to weight loss. And then a lot of the cardiometabolic risk factors went along with that.
So what I'm hearing is that it's the healthy part that is the most important part. The low carb, low fat, high protein is less important if someone wants to lose weight and improve their, their numbers.
There's a 2019 or 2020 JAMA paper that looks at NHANES data. That's the National Health and Nutrition Examination data set, where there's been a van driving around the US for decades, and it just randomly picks up people and measures them and draws blood and stuff. And it's actually where we get great national trend data over time, because they've been doing this for so long. And this one paper that was published was looking at protein, carbs, and fats and the subtypes from, I think, 1999 to 2016. And they were quite stable. And if you just wanted to look at the 3 macronutrients, protein was almost always about 20, fat was almost always about 30, and carbs were almost always about 50. There were really slight differences, but the lines are quite stable. Then they went into the types. So I'm going to have fun explaining this. So of the 30% fat, about 10 was saturated, 10 was mono, and 10 was poly. For the 20% protein, I'm going to oversimplify here, but 10 was animal and 10 was plant. It was lower than that for plant, but just for simple math for listeners, let's just call it 10 and 10. So that left 60 for the carbs. About 10 was high quality carbs. Okay, now let's pause for a minute. 10, 10, 10 for fat, 30. 10, 10 for protein, 50. 10 for good quality carbs, 60. 40% was crappy carbs. It's like the elephant in the room. It's not like, yes, people eat some. It is overwhelming how much added sugar and refined carbs that we eat. So I'm going to give you 3 scenarios. And one is to go on the Ornish diet or Bernard or something like that and get rid of all the crappy carbs and replace them all with great carbs. So fill all those calories with legumes and fruits and intact whole grains. I don't know many people that can do that. Okay, now let's go keto. Let's take all of those 40% of calories from crappy carbs. Let's have fatty fish. Let's have olive oil, avocados, nuts and seeds, and let's replace, but not carbs. Let's have a really low carb but healthy, high fat diet. I don't know many people that can do that. I think the answer is wipe out those carbs and sort of personally see what distribution of healthy fats or healthy carbs work for you. If I got to do the next study, that's what I would do. I'd say wipe out 40% of your calories and let's play with this. Who does better on uber low fat, uber low carb? I found some. Let's say I had 100 people. I bet I find 5 that do great on each one, and I have 90 people left who can't go that low. So maybe a little more fat than carb, maybe a little more carb than fat, maybe half and half. I think there's a huge amount of wiggle room in there in a healthy diet to get rid of that huge chunk of not very beneficial calories and fill it in with all the unapologetically delicious other choices we have, both in the world of carb-rich foods and fat-rich foods.